ready to go. And you are live now.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Harbour Marine Drive Community Council meeting for Thursday, the 4th of February, 2021. It's 6 o'clock. It's time to call the meeting to order. I'd like to do a roll call of those present. Starting off with my colleagues from Council District number 3. Starting off, please identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am President accounted for.
And you are live now.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Harbour Marine Drive Community Council meeting for Thursday, the 4th of February, 2021. I guess we're hearing somebody with delayed over the internet.
That's been muted now. We should be okay.
Okay. Councilor District 4.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and colleagues and everyone. It's Trish from District 4 and happy to be here.
District 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sam Austin here, ready to go. I was wondering if we were maybe 20 seconds in the future there for a moment, but all seems well.
Last but not least, District 6.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody watching. Tony Mancini, District 6, and beautiful Dartmouth, the best part of HRM.
The best part about it is the gateway to the Eastern Shore. We also have a number of staff present tonight. Can I ask them to present themselves, please? Starting off with our solicitor.
Hi again, Claire Gilligan with Legal Services.
Thank you, Claire. Our program manager of regional policy. Will Kate be present?
Yes, sorry. Kate Green, Program Manager, Regional Policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
She forgot what her title was.
I couldn't get back to the screen.
Okay, I'll
you.
call it first names then. Maggie, you present?
I believe Maggie may be not present for this one.
Okay. Thea.
Likewise, I believe Thea may not be present, though she has received the invite.
Okay. How about Carl?
Evening, councilors. Carl Purvis.
Thank you. Is Stephen on board tonight? Mr. Higgins, is he here tonight? Okay. Amy Ellen.
Hi, Jamie Ellen Klenovic. I'm with the Urban Enabled Applications team present.
Thank you. Soban Witherby.
Good evening, everyone. It's Siobhan Witherby, Active Transportation Planner.
Thank you. Would Philip be on board tonight?
Yes, design engineer with HRM Project Planning and Design.
Thank you. Is Mr. McIsaac on board tonight?
Hey folks, David McIsaac, Active Transportation Manager.
Thank you. Simon, of course.
Hello, Mr. Chair.
And do we have Lehman on tonight?
Right here, Mr. Chair. How you doing?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Is there anybody that I missed that I didn't call out? Please identify yourself now.
Hello there, I'm Megan Dalton. I'm a Planner 1 on Regional Planning, and I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll introduce myself as well. It's Jill McClellan with Regional Planning as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, President accounted for. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in tonight and participating. I'll have a motion then to approve the minutes of January 7th, 2021, please.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Mancini.
I have a mover by Mr. Councilor Mancini. Seconder, please.
Second.
Councilor Kent, seconds. Are there any questions on the minutes before I call the question on the motion? All those in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. The order of business. Is there any additions or deletions from the agenda, Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have, through the clerk's office, received no requests for additions or deletions as of this time.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the order of business, councilors who want to proceed as circulated? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated?
I'll move.
Moved by Councilor Purdy, seconded by
I'll second that. Councilor
Councilor
Austin.
Austin. No questions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. No business arising. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest tonight? Hearing none. Thank you. Motions of reconsideration, rescission, or no deferred business. So we have before us a public hearing. Agenda item 10.1.1, case number 22285, development agreement to allow a 12-story multi-unit dwelling at 3 Bartland Road in Dartmouth. I believe Jamie Ellen is going to be presenting, and an applicant presenter will be Mitch Dickey. And just for the record, I have 2 people signed up registered to speak, and I'll get to those later. So first of all, let's have the staff presentation, an application, the presentation by the applicant, please and thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jamie Ellen Klenovic, and I'm a planner with HRM's Urban Enabled Applications team. Can I have slide 2? This application was brought forward by Twin Lakes Development Limited on behalf of the property owners and relates to properties at 3 Bartland Road and 325A and 327 Prince Albert Road in Dartmouth. The image on the right shows the proposed development with the existing lot configuration outlined in red. Slide 3. The request is for a development agreement to allow a 12-story apartment building with ground floor commercial uses facing Prince Albert Road. The building would have 2 towers connected by an underground parking garage and will be approximately 139 feet tall. Next slide. The image on the left shows a general location of the subject site behind the Braemar Superstore and close to Lake Banook in Dartmouth. The image on the right shows more local context with the subject site outlined in red. Alderney Elementary School is to the east of the subject site. Currently, the subject site is comprised of 3 lots, and these will be consolidated prior to any construction. Next slide. This is the view looking south along Prince Albert Road with the subject site on the left and the superstore on the right. The 2-story built form typical of the area is apparent in this image. Slide 6. This is the subject site from Prince Albert Road. The beige and brick building on the left with the white garage door is 335 Prince Albert Road and is not part of the subject site. Slide 7. This image is also the subject site from Prince Albert Road. The yellow and dark blue buildings are both 327 Prince Albert Road. The light blue building on the right is 325A Prince Albert Road. Both of these properties are part of the subject site. Slide 8. This is the view of the subject site from Bartland Road. The brick side facade of 335 Prince Albert Road is visible on the left in this image. Slide 9. This aerial view is of 335 Prince Albert Road and the 2-unit dwellings characteristic of Prince Albert Road north of the subject site. Slide 10. A development agreement to allow a 12-story apartment building on 3 Bartland Road was approved by Harbour East Community Council in 2006. A time extension for this DA was approved by Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council in 2018. This development agreement expired on November 1st, 2020 and would be discharged if Community Council approves the proposed development agreement. Slide 11. The previously approved development is 1 12-story tower with 84 dwelling units. This DA also requires a 10-meter wide public recreation trail on the site connecting Prince Albert Road to Alderney Elementary School. Slide 12. This rendering shows the proposed development from Prince Albert Road. The design includes access to the underground parking garage directly from Prince Albert Road and features an 8-meter street wall. Part of the street wall rises the full 12 stories from grade with no step back. Slide 13. This is the south elevation of the proposed development. Prince Albert Road would be on the far left of this image. The two towers would be connected by an above-ground pedway. Slide 14. We held an in-person public information meeting for this application on September 25th, 2019, which was attended by 51 people. Feedback on the proposal was generally positive, but with some concerns relating to the proposed height of the building being excessive, the parking would be inadequate, and that the proposed development would aggravate existing traffic issues at the intersections of Prince Albert Road, Glenwood Avenue, Lawrence Street, and Graham's Grove. Slide 15. The subject site is within Package A area of the Regional Center. 325A and 327 Prince Albert Road are zoned corridor with a by right height limit of 20 meters. 3 Bartlett Road is zoned higher order residential 1 with a by right height limit of 14 meters. Current uses on the site are residential and commercial. Slide 16. Transition policies in the Regional Center secondary planning strategy allow discretionary planning applications that were deemed complete prior to August 24th, 2019 to be considered under the planning policies that were in effect when the application was received. This means that this application can be considered under the policies of the Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy. Relevant policies are IP1C and IP5 of the Dartmouth NPS. These policies require the Community Council consider a list of criteria in its decision, including the following: compatibility and consistency with adjacent uses and built form, provisions for landscaping, buffering, and screening, the adequacy of existing street and service networks, proximity to schools and recreation amenities, discouraging a scattered development pattern, safe pedestrian movement within the site, drainage and soil stability, adequacy of parking, usable amenity space, and encouraging preservation of mature trees and other natural features. Slide 17. The proposed development agreement allows one apartment building with 2 12-story towers and ground floor commercial uses, and anticipates the subdivision of a portion of what is now 3 Bartlett Road on the northern portion of the site for future by right development. The DA does not include a maximum height. Instead, height is controlled by the permitted number of stories, which is 12 in each tower. The DA does not include a maximum number of units, but the applicant has estimated that there would be 176 dwelling units. At least 30% of the dwelling units must have 2 or more bedrooms. 5 square meters of indoor or outdoor amenity space is required per dwelling unit, and 88 underground parking spaces are required. The development agreement also allows, but does not require, a publicly accessible pedestrian connection between Prince Albert Road and Eldorney Elementary School. If the property owner chooses to construct the trail, it must be built to HRM's active transportation standards. Slide 18. Proposed non-substantive amendments include changes to permitted hours of operation for commercial uses, changes to the location of solid waste facilities, changes to landscaping requirements, changes to the days of commencement and completion, changes to architectural requirements that do not impact the massing of the building, and changes to sign requirements. Slide 19. The Dartmouth NPS requires consideration of the existing neighborhood and development form. The area around the subject site has predominantly 2-story built form, along with 4-story apartment buildings on Lawrence Street and Regent Drive. Maximum height in the corridor zone is 20 meters, or approximately 6 stories, and in the higher order residential 1 zone, maximum by right height is 14 meters, or approximately 4 stories. The area to the north of the subject site, currently characterized by 2-unit dwellings, is in the Package B center plan area and is currently zoned R2 under the Dartmouth Land Use Bylaw. Next slide, slide 20. Staff advised that the proposed development is not compatible and consistent with the existing development form, as is required by policies IP1C2 and IP5 of the Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy, with respect to height, bulk, scale, and exterior design. Use and residential density are less of a concern. There are other multiple unit dwellings and commercial uses in the area of the subject site. Spread over the entire site, the proposed density itself is not a concern so much as the so-called tower in the park built form with its concentrated density that is being proposed. This is a large site. 3 Bartlett Road alone is larger than 1 hectare, and similar residential density could likely be provided on the site with mid-rise built form that meets the relevant policy. The height being proposed is not necessary to get density on this site. The overall density of the proposed development is very similar to the existing density of the multi-unit dwellings on Lawrence Street and Regent Drive. These multis achieve density with a mid-rise built form that integrates with the surrounding area, and that will be possible on the subject site. Staff are also aware of off-site wind effects that will be created if the proposed development is approved. Wind speeds of over 20 kilometers per hour will be created on the grounds of Alderney Elementary School and also on Lawrence Street. The wind comfort and safety performance standards in Table A1-2 of the Regional Center Land Use Bylaw describe winds of over 20 kilometers per hour as being, open quote, strong winds unacceptable for all pedestrian activities, wind mitigation typically required, close quotes. The proposed development agreement does not require any wind mitigation. Slide 21. Staff recommend that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council refuse the proposed development agreement, enabling the development of a 12-story multi-unit dwelling at 3 Bartland Road, 325A Prince Albert Road, and 327 Prince Albert Road, as set out in Attachment A of the report dated December 3rd, 2020. Refuse the proposed discharging agreement. Because the existing development agreement is expired, staff are recommending a time extension. Therefore, staff recommend the Community Council give notice of motion to consider the proposed second amending agreement as set out in Attachment C of the report dated December 3rd, 2020, to allow an extension to the required date of commencement of the existing development agreement on 3 Bartland Road, and approved by resolution the proposed second amending agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in Attachment C of the report dated December 3rd, 2020, to extend the required date of commencement of the existing development agreement on 3 Bartland Road. Slide 22. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the application. So a few chats coming in. Looks like there's a few questions of clarification.
Okay, I believe Councillor Austin may have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 4, just clarifying on the presentation. So, I mean, I understand that the main basis for the negative staff recommendation it's simply the size and scale of this.
Yeah, primarily the height and the bulk. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to clarify as well the pedestrian path. As I understand that one, there's as much problems like with the municipal side of including that pathway as there is, like, it's not an applicant request to not build that path.
No, I think it's more a question of the negotiations that would be required between the applicant and property owner and HRM haven't taken place. It's still a possibility. That pathway would result from a grant of right-of-way that's actually registered on title, which arose when there was a land transaction for the street right-of-way for Bartland Road. So that's still there, and it's still a possibility that the applicant and property owner could go ahead with that trail. There is language in the development agreement that makes it clear that that's permitted, and also requires that that trail would have to conform with HRM's active transportation standards to ensure safety. But that would be up to the property owner and developer to decide whether they want to go through and construct that trail or not.
It seems kind of, that's debate. I'll save that. The wind piece, it was my understanding of the wind report that one of the mitigations would be to retain the tree cover between there. I found the wind study fairly difficult to actually interpret. It's not exactly a user-friendly one. Is the wind impact on Alderney Elementary there with if the mature tree cover is retained on that hillside?
Yeah, so the wind study was completed on the assumption that those trees would remain. If I could have slide 23 from the clerk, these are after the thank you slide. It shows the wind studies estimation for wind on the site in the winter time. So it basically comes down to the wind direction, and the dominant direction changes throughout the year. So in this case, we see the wind coming from the northwest, and the tree cover will provide some buffering, but there's still quite a significant wind effect that would have that would take place on Alderney Elementary School, and also on the bottom part of this image, you can see the red dot over the parking area in the end of the cul-de-sac of Lawrence Street.
Okay.
So if you compare these two charts, just to note, the one on the left talks about wind speed in miles per hour, and then on the right it speaks of wind speed in kilometers per hour. So it's actually yellow, orange, or red that would be over 20 kilometers per hour, which would be uncomfortable wind speed.
Okay, thank you. And so then my last question is, I mean, there is a previously approved development agreement for this property. It has expired. It would be, you know, in total fairness to staff, you guys didn't recommend that one either in 2006 when it came to council. Why do we have a recommendation that is to extend the timeline of that if we're also recommending against the revised proposal? If we think the one isn't appropriate, how come we're not also recommending that council not renew the existing development agreement?
So these two developments are quite a bit different in the sense that the original development was for one tower, and it's actually double the density for the most recent proposal, and it's the location of the building has also moved. So yes, it's kind of an awkward position for staff to be in, because you're right, there was a negative staff recommendation originally, and for the same reasons, it was height and bulk. However, council at the time felt that it did meet policy, so they approved the development. So when the original application came forward for a time extension in 2018, we took council's position that they felt like that was meeting policy. So that would still, I guess, be the case at this point, even though the original staff recommendation was against approval.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that it's an awkward spot to be in. Thank you.
Councilor Mancini, you had a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. My question is around parking. You identified 88 underground parking spots. I missed it. Are there any outdoor parking spots, visitor parking spots?
I believe that there are some sites that are permitted but not required on this site, so it would be primarily for visitor parking.
I'm sorry, so there are visitor parking identified, is that correct? Or?
Yes, surface parking. They're not required by the development agreement.
Right, okay. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Are there any further questions of councilors to Councilor Kent? You had one. Thank you.
I did, Mr. Chair, and I'll forgive you for missing me. I have a couple of questions in relation to the old versus the new. So the former one was approved. What was and it was on a new different location. How would the wind, how would the wind have, I'm sure you would have had a wind measurement back on that first tower. How does that compare to this?
Unfortunately, I'm not aware that there was any wind assessment done for the original.
Okay, and the height was the same?
The height is very similar. They're both 12 stories. I think the current proposal is a little bit taller, but still 12 stories.
Okay, and
but
the
two 12-story towers instead of one.
And back when the first one, obviously it was a different number of units. Was there, I assume, the traffic study done then? Was that one also okay with traffic? Was that?
Both traffic studies. It was a traffic statement that I believe that was provided as opposed to a full traffic study. However, I would note that the traffic statement doesn't include any potential traffic from the development at Glenwood and Prince Albert Road. The hotel that's being constructed at that location is not considered in the traffic segment.
Okay. Can you tell me the difference between what is bulk versus scale?
So I guess that's a question of interpretation, and everybody can kind of take what they want from those words. For me personally, bulk refers more to the built form, and scale, for example, in this case, would relate more to the intensity or the residential density on the site. So in this case, the scale is less of a concern simply because you have one tower with all of the density, sorry, two towers with all the density concentrated in one area, but there's quite a bit of the site that's open. So if we look at the whole site, the density, the overall density of the site isn't that out of line with what the other multis in the area. So the scale is not so much a concern as the bulk. It's a large building, much larger, taller, wider, deeper than other buildings in the area.
Okay, and you said that there was concern around the, I forget what it's called, the design, I guess, or the look of the building. Can you just explain that to me? Maybe I've got the words wrong. I thought I had written it down, but I didn't.
So one of the criteria in the policy is to analyze the exterior design. Is that maybe what you're thinking of?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So in this case, so for example, in this case, the building is set very close to 335 Prince Albert Road. That's an existing two-story with residential uses on the second floor. So instead of stepping back, so building is set and then it comes up to a podium 1 story and then steps back and then comes up again, I believe, to 3 stories and steps back and then goes to full 12 stories. There are design treatments that they could have applied to reduce the impact of the new development on that existing built form. So that is what we mean when we say the exterior design. And also the street wall in the front of the building where it rises to full height without any stepping back, that is something that could possibly degrade the pedestrian environment in front of the development.
And how would you measure that?
It's quite subjective. So in this case, the wind effects on Prince Albert Road will be degraded. So there will be more wind on Prince Albert Road, and that's one thing that happens when there's no step back from the street wall. The wind is not deflected away from the street.
Can you show me that picture again with what it looks like in regards to that?
Yeah, let me just see what slide that was. So slide 12, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, we've got another presentation from Mr. Dickey.
Just bear in mind our producer is just loading the presentation again.
Okay. All your questions been answered there, Councillor Kent?
Thank you. Yeah. I just want to see that.
See, Councillor Purdy has a question.
I do. Just a quick one, because when I was reading this, I just couldn't help but think with staff's decision in weighing the importance of size and scale of the development with the MPS in the neighborhood, how much weight would our current housing crisis have in that decision?
So when staff go through the policy, our analysis is really focused on the policy. So unfortunately, that doesn't give us a lot of wiggle room to consider broader housing issues and housing market in Halifax. However, I would comment that while this is a big site and it would be great to have some residential density here, the height is not required. So there's a lot of this site that is proposed to remain vacant, and there could be several mid-rise buildings on this site as opposed to one large building. And that would be more suitable for the site.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for staff before we get to the presentation from the applicant? Hearing none, then I'll ask for Mitch Dickey to come forward and make a presentation to Community Council, please.
Just providing a note that speakers speaking by telephone may have to unmute themselves. They can do so by pressing *6 on their phone.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. Appreciate the time. On behalf of Twin Lakes, I'd like to say we're very excited to be to this point with the public hearing and the redesign of this signature project in the Graham's Corner area of Dartmouth. If we could advance to the slide 2, please. Can we go to slide 2?
This is just a note that the slides will be somewhat delayed, but it is displaying slide 2.
Okay, I'm just going by my screen here, sorry. Okay, there we go. So there'll be a little bit of repetition with what Jamie Ellen discussed here. Again, so starting with some context, here you can see the site highlighted in red, right in the Graham's Corner development node. As you know, it's a mixed-use node adjacent to the superstore, access to a lot of community and park uses, a wide range of commercial uses and services, a number of apartment buildings in the area of varied scales, including the 16-story hotel that's now under construction just to the 100 meters to the west of the site. So it's quite a walkable node. As you can see, we've laid out walking distances here in line with HRM's urban design principles. You know, we're looking to create and foster a walkable community here, increase the area population that can support the services, and encourage far less reliance on the automobile. Now, previously, this particular area under the Dartmouth plan had been designated largely either commercial or for higher density residential. So the new center plan has now replaced all of that, but the intent is still the same, to encourage substantial medium and high density mixed use intensification in the area. If we could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, visual aid.
Again, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this shows the approved development concept as Jamie Ellen showed. So outlined in red was the previous site boundary, 2¼ acres or so, and as you can see, the building was very well set back out of necessity due to the lack of frontage. And it's worth noting here that there's quite a hill on this site from Prince Albert Road up to the boundary along the school property. It's around 70 feet change in grade. So this building that was approved, being high up the hill, would have required very extensive excavation and cutting into the hillside. And although the intent was to retain some trees, it would have been difficult to retain anything meaningful. And you can see that it was quite close to homes to the left. There's semi-detached dwellings there on Curly Drive. The setback was only 70 feet, and that was one of the main concerns from staff in 2006 with the original application. And I think Jamie Ellen said it, but to create this site, Twin Lakes had bought 2 parcels of land from HRM. So there had been a purchase and sale agreement approved by Regional Council that was subject to Harbour East Council at the time approving the development agreement. So both of those things did go ahead. And it wasn't until 2013 that the development agreement could actually be registered, because there were some title problems that HRM had to clear up before that land could be transferred over. Just relative to market a little bit, Twin Lakes has always seen most of the market for this project as being those already living in the central Dartmouth area, still in their homes and looking to downsize and stay in their neighborhood without having to go to Baker Drive, which has actually become a common complaint in Dartmouth, that for the most part, people have to move to Baker Drive when they're ready to get out of their home. So one clear benefit out of this project that we would see is that, there's been a lot of interest in people signing leases for this. So we would see a bit of a trickle down effect where a lot of houses will come empty. The housing market is very tight now, and we would see the ability for a lot of younger families to be able to move into the area to support the school. Alderney School, for instance, is at a low capacity now. So, being able to provide a complete community with all types and tenures of housing in the area will help keep people in their neighborhood and help bring in new families. The design there, it did make the best use of the site as it was at the time, but it was certainly going to be a bit of a challenge to construct. With the delay in the land transfer, that actually became a blessing in the end, as Twin Lakes saw an opportunity to make some changes to the project and substantially approve upon it. And that original development agreement gives council considerable flexibility by way of amendments. It really said that community council, as a non-substantive amendment to the DA, could completely change the design of the building and move the building around on the lot. It could even go taller, as long as it did not exceed 84 units. So that's kind of the first part of the application that Twin Lakes has made, is to do a redesign of that existing approved tower. If we could go to slide 4, please. And there are some animations on this slide. Hopefully we'll be able to get through them in order. Yeah, there we are. So with Twin Lakes being able to take a second look at the project, there we go. The opportunity to add additional land arose. So what we see there right now is the original site area. And then we can click and we'll see the additional properties that have come into play.
That
should be the acquisition of 2 additional properties at 325A and 327 Prince Albert Road. Those, just waiting for them to show up on this end. There we go. So that's adding almost an acre to the site, those two parcels. And as you can see, it creates a much more rational, regularly shaped development site. So it creates a very large development site, which is quite unusual in the urban core. There are some challenges on the site, but the size of it and the context within the community provides some good options for a high quality design. So the goal with Twin Lakes then was to come up with a new project that will blend as well as possible with minimal impacts. If we could go to the next animation. Oops, missed a slide there. No, I guess not. No, we're good. We can go to slide 5, sorry. Bit awkward doing it this way.
There's 1 minute remaining.
Oh, geez. I'm losing time to this time lag. So we'll skip to the.
Let's go ahead.
Yeah, we'll skip to slide 6.
The slide is displaying now.
Okay. Yeah, so in the redesign, there were 3 key design principles to minimize site disruption, improve transition to the surroundings, and enhance street presence. So one goal was to less excavation on the hill, maintain more trees, reduce the massing of the tower, improve transition to the surroundings. So see there's some animations there. We can bring in some of the layers. And that will show the evolution of the design. So the first thing was to pull the mass of the approved building further down the hill. And in the animation that comes off, no, that's the next one. Retain trees. It's actually possible to retain an acre of trees up there. Pull the mass down towards Prince Albert Road. The floor plates of these two towers are actually substantially less than the approved tower. They're about 35% smaller than the floor plate size of the approved tower. So it substantially reduces the massing of the project. And by moving the towers this way, we move them well away from low density residential neighborhood and ensure excellent transitions in scale to adjacent development. And with this approach, we're able to create a pedestrian-oriented street with ground floor commercial uses and a bit of a street plaza with good hard landscaping and pedestrian fixtures along there. And in terms of transitions, over on the left-hand side of the site where you see phase 2, that is a part of the site that's being reserved for future development, which would be subject to the zone, center plan zoning, which would be a 4-floor medium density building, 40 to 50 units probably. And that would provide the ideal transition to that existing low density neighborhood. To the left, if we can activate the next animation, we can see the building heights. Center plan targets all of these lands for fairly high intensity mid-rise development. The property at 335 Prince Albert is slated for 6-story development. And under the center plan rules, that can be built right to the property line, and you'd probably be able to achieve 60 or 70 units on that site. Over to the right, where there's currently 2 single-family homes, which are slated for demolition in the short term, there's a redevelopment project happening there that would also be 6 floors and probably about 80 units as a preliminary estimate. So you can see that with the 12-story heights in the middle, it steps down and transitions very well each direction on Prince Albert Road in terms of height, 12 to 6 to 4. And the existing apartment buildings on Lawrence Street, they're 4 stories, and there's some indication that there'll be some redevelopment up there under the new zoning as well. So really, this project fits in with the goals of center plan to allow intensive development in the area. Can we go to the next slide?
We approach the completion. We're almost up to 15 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I'm almost done. So slide 7 just shows the site plan, which is the same as the one in your staff report. It shows extensive landscaping at grade. The towers are well set back from the property lines on each side. They're set back from the street to create the pedestrian plaza, and that shows the large tree retention area behind. The site plan shows a walkway going up the right side of the site. The original submission, it showed it going up to connect to Alderney School, but we were asked to remove that after a review of the pedestrian connection by Parks and Transportation and Works. They felt that the grades were unmanageable, so it was suggested that we remove it. However, Twin Lakes would be willing, to work with council to provide something, and with adjacent redevelopments, there may be the opportunity to work something that way as well. Next slide, slide 8. I'll be very quick on these. So these buildings are designed heavily using HRM's urban design guidelines. They have low-rise 2 to 3 floor podiums that are set back at grade. The upper tower floors are well set back. As I'd said, these tower floor plates are about 35% smaller than in the approved building. So this gives you a sense of the perspective view of the development, and it also gives you a cross-section of the project coming down the hill from Alderney School. If we go to, and that also shows how the 20 feet there, where we've pulled the initial tower down the hill, it makes it 20 feet shorter as perceived from the street and the lake, and it's also much further away from Alderney School. Slide 9. Slide 9 is just a quick look at the street scale design. It's fine-grained, pedestrian-oriented design. It draws cues from Shubenacadie Canal and Star Manufacturing, which were heavily reliant on timber and stonework. And slide 10 will just give us a project summary. As noted, there are 175 units. The underground parking, there's actually about 210 parking spaces underground on 3 levels, and there are about 25 surface spaces, both for visitor spaces and for the commercial businesses that would be located on the ground floor. And there'd be up to 8,500 square feet of commercial along Prince Albert Road. So Twin Lakes has worked a long time on this project, and they've consulted heavily with the local community. The principals have done a lot of one-on-one meetings with property owners. And on slide 11, just an indication of the strong support that they've been able to build in the community. These are shows addresses where it's our understanding that submissions have been sent in from people who are in support of the project. And we've received a lot of support from people around Lake Banook for this project. So based on the extensive redesign and the community engagement that we have done, we really feel that this is a great project. It's a huge improvement over the original one from 2006. It offers a lot of benefits to the community. You know, it's well in line with other high-rise projects that have been approved in Dartmouth. And you know, when you compare some of the key metrics, you know, it really should not be seen as in conflict with the Dartmouth Municipal Plan policies. But anyway, at any rate, Twin Lakes is asking for council's support, and we hope that the project can move ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It took almost 20 minutes to do a 10-minute presentation. It was very, 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 a lot of information there. I appreciate it very much. I believe we have some questions of clarification. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Dickey, for the presentation. I have just one clarification for the developer. The phase 2 lands. It was my same question at when we were debating whether to schedule this public hearing. The tree cover on the site, how much of that really falls onto those phase 2 lands, right? I mean, basically what I'm wondering is, do we end up losing some of our tree cover on the hillside if council were to approve this in the end anyway through phase 2?
There would be very, very little of that tree cover would be affected, Councillor. I'm just looking for the right graphic here. Yeah, there's already quite a bit of bare area on that part of the site where there used to be a home and a parking area. So it would be the intent from the preliminary design thinking that most of the building mass would be able to kept down close to Prince Albert Road. It's a headache to excavate into the hillside the further you go up. So the goal would be to stay down as low as possible, and perhaps have a street-oriented building rather than have something that's pushed further up. But we feel that 1 acre of trees can be protected.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Mancini, you had a question, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dickey, just a quick question. Has the applicant had much conversation with the folks at the Superstore? And the reason I asked that question, I asked a question earlier of staff about parking. Because the Superstore is right there, it's quite obvious that you would have tenants or visitors trying to utilize that parking spot. So has there any conversation around that? And also around the wind study that was identified by HRM staff, any conversation about allowing the applicant to continue on with the role of trees to create a wind buffer?
Just one moment, Councillor, sorry.
Greg's looking at a call from Superstore from Clark, and if they didn't have an issue with it, they're aware of what's going on. There's no issue.
Okay. Yeah, there was a conversation with Superstore. There's no particular concern there. They do keep an eye on their parking lot about how many people are using it that aren't using their store, but they have no particular concerns. In fact, in speaking to the regional manager a couple of years ago of Loblaws, he said, putting a couple of hundred apartments right next to one of their stores can only be good for business for them.
And what about the trees?
The tree cover, we in conversations with Rob LeBlanc, the qualified person who did the wind study, he is very comfortable that the potential wind impacts on the school will not materialize, that retaining the trees will address that concern, which would be normal. We are able to maintain the trees. It's predominantly a mature mixed-use forest. We're not anticipating that we would lose trees to blow-down effects to any large extent from construction of this project. There are young trees in there that would grow up over time. It would just be a continued cycle of growth and regrowth in there. So on that basis, there's no need to introduce any other mitigation measures.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions from any of the councillors? Hearing none, we'll go now to the public hearing presentation or public hearing portion. Just to like to thank everyone who joined us tonight for this public hearing case 22285. We had the presentations. Now we had to have people sign up before 4:30 yesterday for this meeting, and we have 2 people signed up, Chuck Bridges and Shelley Bridges, both with Dartmouth. Is Chuck or Shelley on the line? We'll have them come forward and speak 5 minutes to the application. You hit *6 to unmute.
Hello, this is Shelley Bridges speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak this evening. I live at Lorne Avenue, and I'm a lifelong resident. I think we can all agree that there's a housing crisis in HRM, and that Dartmouth is certainly becoming more and more attractive to everyone. It's not likely that the crisis is going to improve anytime soon, given the level of immigration, both domestic and international, and that HRM has enjoyed and that we project. More housing is needed, and currently housing starts are not keeping up with the numbers of people who are coming to our area. Many of us are anticipating how we're going to live further into our retirement and where we're going to live. And for the most part, we want to stay in our central Dartmouth community. And in particular, for our family, we'd like to stay within walking distance of Lake Binook. And we believe that this project is very exciting, that it suits the area, and that there's a great demand for exactly this kind of development. It suits our needs, but it's also the kind of development that I think is very, very much needed. I've taken a look at the plan and I've read the staff recommendation against approval, and I don't believe the recommendation is the right choice at all. So I ask you to allow the project to move forward with the greatest of speed. And I know, and I believe in my heart that this developer, that this project and City Council can come to agreements on some of the smaller things that may need a little bit of change, but I think it's a very, very good project, and I hope you will approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Would Chuck be on the line, please? Would Chuck Bridges be on the line?
He may have had some difficulties. Can you hear me?
Yes.
He may have had some difficulties with his telephone. No, he is not on the line.
Mr. Clark?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. He is not on the line.
Okay. Mr. Clark, in this case, do we try to reach out to him because he did register to speak, or due to technical difficulties? How do we proceed?
Thank you. If there's comfort to do so, we can attempt to communicate. I believe that we saw a number that's the number that from.
Just a moment.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, is this be Chuck?
Hi, Councillor Hensby.
Yes, sir. How you doing, sir? You have
sorry, concern. I've got less than 5 minutes. I just wanted to thank the. Sorry, say again.
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Shall I begin?
You're cutting out.
No, I'm having trouble hearing you. I'll just begin and expect that you can hear me. Councillor Hensby, other councillors, staff, and neighbours, thank you for allowing us this time tonight to explain why so many of us are keen on having this project go ahead. Our reasons today are the same reasons as they were at the last public hearing, more than a year ago. It is a good addition to the neighbourhood. It's an opportunity for us to address some of the housing challenges our city faces, and it fits within our stated goal of having the most livable city in Canada. More broadly, we support Mr. Ewell and Mr. Zareski as professionals who understand the neighbourhood as it has grown over the last number of years to become a rather unique spot in the city. It's also more than unusual that citizens are opposed to development who come and speak at these gatherings, but we are solidly in support of the development and feel it's important that we lend our voices to what the developers are attempting to do. We also believe that the concerns raised by staff have been handled in a most positive way, as adjustments have been made since way back as early as 2006. And aside from this project, I think is important is that our family has lived in this neighborhood for almost 4 decades, and we would like to stay retired here so that our grandchildren can enjoy this neighborhood, as did our children, their parents. We also know what we want for the next steps in the evolution of our neighborhood, and this development fits in, and it fits in nicely. And if we feel that any complaints or concerns that the staff might have raised, all of which we respect, have been handled by the developer. And we look forward to being one of those who eventually will sell their home and move down into a little closer to the superstore, a little closer to the lake, and be able to continue to enjoy this neighborhood as we have done for the last 4 years or so. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bridges. That is the end of our speaking list. I'd also like to note the amount of correspondence that received. Mr. Clerk, can you just make a notation of what the correspondence we received also pertaining to this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Community Council, we did receive, I believe, 29 pieces of correspondence. Those have all been circulated to members of Community Council.
Thank you. So hearing no more speakers on the list and acknowledgement of the correspondence received, I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
Move close public hearing, Mr. Chair.
Second, CD.
Moved by Councillor Austin, seconded by Councillor Mancini. We close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing is closed. I'll ask for a motion, Mr. Councillor Austin. I'll let you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just let me go over here so I can actually read it. So I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council 1 approve the proposed development agreement and discharging agreement, which shall be substantially of the form as set out in attachment A and B of the August 12th, 2020 report. And 2, require the agreements be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end.
Second by Mancini.
Moved and seconded. Further debate. Councillor Mancini. Sorry, Councillor Austin.
It's to say, Mr. Chair, I didn't lose my whole 5 minutes, did I? So thank you, colleagues and the staff and everyone for participating tonight. So I'm going to start with the point of agreement, which is that we, between staff, developer, and I think actually community too, based on the feedbacks we have, this is a good site for development. It's in the core, it's identified as a spot in the center plan that we want to see growth on, has access to transit, good access to service, there's parks, there's a school, grocery store. This is a good spot. So the staff report recommends against it based on the size and scale of this. And I'm going to advocate to do for something that I've never done in my time on council, at least not I can think of in my own district, maybe once in Councillor Walker's when he was advocating at council. I'm actually going to support the proponents here and ask you to vote in favor of the motion and not in favor of the staff recommendation. I don't do that lightly. We have a professional staff that do a great job, but I think there are some particular circumstances around this one that make it something that I'm comfortable going the other way on. And so the first one, and I've said this tongue-in-cheek in the past, that if you can't convince staff, you better at least be able to convince the community. Well, this one, they've actually done that. The public meeting at the Micmac Aquatic Club I attended, it was like no public meeting I'd been to. It was people were overwhelmingly in support, and that support has continued with the feedback that we received on this, mainly in correspondence here with the public hearing. Normally, for something like this, you'd expect to have nearby neighbors out in opposition, and there's been none of that. The community seems to be on board with this. In terms of the compatibility with the surrounding area, it's very much, it's an area that's very much in flux. I mean, you've got 16-story hotel under construction. We've got some old 4-story mid-rise buildings. We've got 2 houses coming up Prince Albert Road, like just old residential homes that have been bought and will not be there for much longer. And then some low-rise commercial, and then the superstore, which is low-rise but has a huge footprint. So, and then finally duplexes at the end of Prince Albert. It's a very different sort of neighborhood, and so pinning down what is compatible in there, I think, is difficult, and some of that is based on the design. And I think the project has done some good design to mitigate those impacts with the street wall, the setbacks, and so I think that counts for a fair bit. Lastly, there's a real practical element here. if we say no to this and accept the staff recommendation, which includes an extension of the existing development agreement, we get a building up on the crest of the hill that has no street wall presence, that is much closer to the duplexes on Curly, that's much closer to Alderney Elementary, that wipes out the forested hillside. And I think when you look at this from just from a practical perspective of, well, which one is the better design for the area, for the community, it's very clear. I sympathize with the position that staff have been in, because they didn't recommend for the original proposal either. So in a way, I can see the consistency from a staff point of view, but I think the practicality here is we're going to get a better designed project by accepting this redesign, even though it is bigger, than we will get if we say no to this and we leave the existing proposal to build the tower at the crest of the hill right next to the school with no street presence. So I'm comfortable with like I said, this is a new one for me. I don't usually overrule our staff, but in this case, I think there's enough particular circumstance around it, especially in that public support, the existing agreement, and the efforts that have been made around compatibility in an area of Dartmouth that is kind of all over the place in its character. So with that, I would ask colleagues to support it as well. Thank you.
Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the Bridget said it quite well. There's a lot of people living in the area. This borders my district, right over the overpass is where District 6 starts, and a lot of people that want to downsize want to stay in the area. And no disrespect to Councillor Kent, but not all wanting to go to that part of the district where we see a lot of folks after retiring or downsizing going. So I feel the form fits the area well. The 2 towers versus the 1 tower works out well. Also, it's a good location. I mean, look at this location: walking, the lake, Shuby Park, the schools, access to the downtown core. Not that difficult to zip out to go to Councillor Purdy's area. It's a perfect location. So I support this. I will vote in favor of the project. I do want to take this opportunity to share with you my displeasure of these virtual meetings for public hearings. It's terrible. The sound is terrible. It's hard for the public. I can't imagine if we're dealing with a public hearing that has lots of opposition, lots of opinion to it, where we have 100 people trying to do this virtually. It's horrible, and we've got to fix this, because I would be deferring if I have a public hearing that has to be done in this manner. So I think it's really terrible. That's just my opinion on it. So I will be supporting the motion to move forward on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Mancini. Councillor Kent in defense of Baker Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was thinking that maybe he was referring to Ocean View Continuing Care down here, thinking that was where people were going to end up going. And both are lovely. Both are will take good care of you. So I was on the council when this was originally approved in 2006. I remember it at the time, and I remember the conversations with looking to the future and looking more towards this kind of like bringing something new, bringing new opportunities to neighborhoods in what we felt was the right location. So of course I came in with that and was anxious to hear for opportunities of change. I think we cannot neglect to talk very firmly around the need for housing. We are in unprecedented times on so many levels, but certainly from housing options, housing. The speaker spoke to that very eloquently around, leaving a smaller family home to something like this. What an amazing journey, opportunity, and it opens up a new family home for someone who might not be ready for that. So not only that, it's an upscale and up to date development project that I look forward to seeing come to fruition. The fact that the hotel and a few little down the street is 16 floors, I think that horse is out of the barn around height. That there's a number of units around 6 stories, and this gives you a very multi-faceted environment to choose from for living accommodations. I think that just will lift up this area of the Dartmouth and district. I forget what district you are, Sam. This district 5. Thank you, Councillor Mancini. The option I think the staff put forward, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but the option of a whole bunch, several mid-size, smaller apartment buildings, to me, that's old school. That's kind of what's there now. And I think this area deserves to have this kind of infrastructure in their neighborhood where they can continue their journey of life and bring new people to that pristine location. So I'm happy to support it. I'm pleased that these developers who I think have done a good job bringing forward a better, an even better option, had the ability to stick to it. Not often does that happen. So I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Councillor Purdy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also want to say I'm so happy to support this motion. I concur with all of my colleagues. I ditto. So happy that the trees are staying and that buffer between the development and the elementary school, excellent. It's a beautiful development in an amazing neighborhood. So very happy to support this. Thank you.
No further questions, then I'll call for the question on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Let the vote show that was unanimous. Thank you very much, and good luck to the developer. Hopefully done in a timely fashion. Next item on the business is correspondence. Any other correspondence besides what's been received for the public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Community Council, no other correspondence.
Okay, do we have any petitions to be filed tonight, Council? Hearing none, we'll move on to presentations. We have a request for presentation tonight from the Dartmouth Crossing, an update on progress. We have speaking Margot Young. Would you please present?
Actually, it's Glenn Monroe speaking, Mr. Chair. If you will provide me a minute to introduce members. May I proceed?
Go ahead.
Yes, you may. Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of council, and more importantly, newly elected and re-elected members of council, congratulations on your elections and re-elections. My name is Glenn Monroe. I'm the managing partner of NADG, and I've been involved with Dartmouth Crossing since we bought the land in 2003, 2004. I'm just going to introduce a couple of comments, and then I'll pass it back to Margot and Greg. 3 most common questions I'm asked about Dartmouth Crossing are, what did you see that made you think retail would work here? What other stores are coming? And when is the residential starting? 500 acre, the answer to the first one, we saw a site that was in the middle of the it's almost the geographic center of HRM, adjacent to 2, soon to be 3 100 series highways. At the time, especially at the time, DC was under retailed, Dartmouth was under retailed, Halifax was under retail. The question about retailers, obviously the IKEA question lasted a decade. LL Bean has been a continual question, and the one we can't solve is when's Red Lobster coming? I can't quite figure that one out. We started this 16 years ago. We told council that we were looking to build a major development to include retail, residential, office. We're most of the way through. Margot is going to take you through that. We've worked in partnership with community council and council as a whole, 5 or 6 reports over the years, and we've delivered pretty well what we said we would deliver. It's a retail, lodging, entertainment center, employs thousands of people, and we're looking forward to be wrapping it up with some housing in the near future. We just wanted to bring you up to date while we could. Margot, thanks for your support, and Margot, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Glenn. Mr. Chairman, members of Community Council, I'm hoping you can hear me. There is a little bit of history in our slideshow, as well as some of the current and upcoming plans for Dartmouth Crossing. I'm going to click through ahead with the slides. Somebody shout at me, please, if I get ahead or your slideshow isn't coordinated with mine. So starting with slide 3, please. Next. Dartmouth Crossing is a former very large quarry. In 2003, when Dartmouth Crossing purchased the property, it was home to an active asphalt plant. Set with its sediment ponds, there were abandoned quarries, 2 active quarry faces. There was a material sorting facility and an unregulated C&D dump. It was a brownfield site requiring a cleanup, which was regulated through the Department of Environment and DFO at the time. Interestingly enough, the property was the instigator for the Dartmouth Lakes Advisory Board, which was active for many years in Dartmouth, and the focus of that group was cleaning up the condition of the brooks that were leaving the site. Slide 4, please. The reclamation of these brooks has been a resounding success at Dartmouth Crossing. We are complete with that project now, with the new brook in behind the IKEA being fully restored and reclaimed wetland, reconstructed wetland installed there with the IKEA project. Grassy Brook, despite its urban location, is still the most productive trout stream in the province of Nova Scotia. The in-stream design, including the spawning beds, has been throughout the projects is that of Dr. Bob Rutherford, and the streams receive ongoing cleanup and monitoring support from the Saco Rivers Association, as well as other volunteer fishing groups. Slide 5, please. Fish Park is a public park, and it's the jewel in the crown of these restored brooks. It includes active, productive fish habitat, and it is also a programmed urban space with an amphitheater. It's owned by the municipality. It's a fully public park. Slide 6, please. The reclamation plan for Dartmouth Crossing and the brooks is far more extensive than just the stream bed work that we typically speak to. There is a comprehensive watershed plan for the entire project. It addresses how water is used and where all the stormwater needs to go. And so the master plan for Dartmouth Crossing, the actual physical layout of the buildings, is part of the reclamation plan for this project. And the plan includes a number of technologies that were required as part of that, that overall reclamation plan. And some of these include roof storage of clean water, oil separation systems in all the parking lots, treatment of the water from the parking lots. There are wider buffers on these streams than required in the municipality. There's also groundwater infiltration required in many locations. Each phase of Dartmouth Crossing still refers back to this original master plan and the stakeholders that created this plan. And I would like to say, you know, this project and the whole overall stormwater management was led by DFO. Department of Environment, through their reclamation group, was very supportive. Kathy Spencer, many of you may remember her as one of the head development officer at Dartmouth. She was key in finding a way to tie this into the tentative subdivision approval plan, which allows it to be continue to be administered by your staff. And Ken McKenzie, development engineer, who is now over at Halifax Water, was also integral to that process. NSTIR was part of the project because with the highway widening, the culverts were upgraded to allow for fish passage and size to allow for increased stormwater and anticipated from the developed plans. Slide 7, please. Now, between 2004 and 2006, there were many additional master plan studies that were undertaken for the lands in order to identify the size and cost of the off-site and on-site infrastructure. And these studies were required by Dartmouth Crossing in order to all of these studies required Dartmouth Crossing to identify what their full build-out would be on these lands. Obviously, if you're sizing intersections, if you're sizing sewer pipes, you have to know what your land uses are. And so this was the original proposed land uses we had for our project. Slide 8, please. At the same time, Burnside was planning their expansion into the Phase 12 lands, and so there were ongoing traffic studies and sewer studies, and there was an opportunity to jointly plan these areas as well for all of the shared infrastructure that was taking place. Slide 9, please. The DCL master traffic study, again, all the traffic identified in this was for the large oversized and off-site infrastructure, so it included the interchange, the collector distributor roads along the highway, and the major connections between Dartmouth Crossing and Burnside. Again, these systems were sized for the land uses, and the excerpt from the report and those land uses shown in that on the slide on top of the red cover. Slide 10, please. Similarly, all the internal streets were designed based on the master plan for land uses. So for example, Finley and Wright Avenue were designed to accommodate the traffic generated by the planned land uses. In most cases, these streets are much larger than any of the as-of-right standards. However, they are right-sized for the planned uses, which in this case included a very large amount of retail space as well as commercial space. Slide 11, please. Similarly, there are a whole shelf load of additional studies that dealt with sewer, water infrastructure, both internal and external infrastructure. Dartmouth Crossing laid out all its land uses and sized and paid for the trunk sewer extension from near the Micmac Mall out to Dartmouth Crossing. And similarly, the internal systems were sized. Now, they weren't overbuilt, but they were built to purpose for the master plan as laid out. Slide 12, please. This is a recent master plan of the Dartmouth Crossing, and it illustrates the location where the land uses have been built out to date. The project, as you can see, is at about 75 to 80% complete. The northern area, which is directly connected to Burnside, is where retailers with significant trucking requirements are located. And they are, you know, the IKEA and the very large tent that has moved up there. To the south is the classic area of retailing, and that's what we might refer to as our big box area. There is, however, sidewalks and a bus loop that runs through this area. The center of the site is the village shops. That includes the village north, an entertainment, restaurant, and hotel retail area, and the south village, an office and fashion area. Through the middle of the section are shared services anchored with Costco, but also including your Tim's and gas. The current approved residential areas are still to come, and they are shown in as the orange outlined area. Next slide, please. Just want to take a moment and discuss some of the infrastructure at Dartmouth Crossing in terms of its ownership. The green streets are publicly owned streets. In the diagram, these streets were built by the developer and they are now owned by the municipality. The rest of the streets, and this is actually the majority of the streets, are in private ownership, which means they are maintained and repaired by Dartmouth Crossing and by the retailers in this area. Legally, these streets are classified as driveways, but they function as streets. For example, in the southern big box area, they are 4 lanes wide and complete with transit facilities. In the village shop area, these private streets have allowed for much smaller streets than we would otherwise be able to build, and they include far more pedestrian amenities, such as underground power, concrete pavers, extensive planting, outdoor music, and children's playgrounds. In the future residential area, again, a private street system is being proposed to create a green esplanade focused on the multi-purpose trail. Again, this is a design feature that would not be possible with the public street system. Next slide, please. So slide 14. The plan is to include residential areas in Burnside and Dartmouth Crossing. This idea originates from 1994, but was not implemented by Council until the regional plan in 2006 through the BCDD designation and zone, which at that time included both Dartmouth Crossing and the Burnside Business Park. So the original Burnside boundary is shown in the top diagram. The original BCDD boundary is shown in the top diagram. In the 2014 regional plan update, which is the bottom image, the boundaries were adjusted and removed from the Burnside lands so that the BCD designation remains only on the Dartmouth Crossing lands. And so that's the orange area in the bottom image. These policies were also moved from the regional plan into the Dartmouth plan at that time. Now the BCDD is a little bit confusing because it is both a designation and a zone. So developing residential within the BCDD is a two-step process. The first step is to make an application to Community Council to consider if the overall area where the residential is proposed has the potential to be a good residential district. The entire block of land is looked at against a policy set that includes requirements for connections to transit, parks, trails, and amenities, the requirements for a concept plan for the area, along with many other criteria including considering the effects on business functions. If Council thinks that an overall area can accommodate residential, then the area can be rezoned to BCDD. The second step is then to undertake a development agreement that allows Council to confirm that the building and site design, this is the detailed site design, achieves these overall objectives. And so for clarity, Dartmouth Crossing can't just come out and demand a development agreement for a residential building in the Canadian Tire parking lot, for example. Slide 15, please. The RP plus 5.
Are we close to wrapping up?
I have about another 5 minutes if I could, please, Councillor.
It's been 15 so far.
I'm sorry?
15 minutes so far. I'll give you 3 more minutes, please.
Thank you. The RP plus 5 process took an inventory of remaining lands and identified that 2,500 units planned for Dartmouth Crossing were to remain active. Slide 16. Since the regional plan, Dartmouth Crossing has been before Community Council, showing their planned residential development. Slide 17. The area identified as Pad 60, which is the star, is the area we came forward and demonstrated to Community Council in 2018 would be a good area for the residential development. It is connected through a multi-purpose trail that runs north and south through the property. That's the orange dotted line. And also, this multi-purpose trail also connects under the highway and into the bike lanes into Burnside Business Park. The overall park plan strategy for this, I won't go into the detail, but it was developed in consultation with your staff, in particular Jan Skor and Rob Jenke. There are both public and private parks in Dartmouth Crossing. Again, I won't detail them because of time, but say that they exist. Slide 18. The next slide shows the proposed build out of Pad 60. It's at the top of the screen. The area identified for residential and rezoned in 2018 by Community Council is shown in the yellow outline. Slide 19. Slide 19 shows the first phase of residential. Slide 20 shows the first building that is approved for development by Council in 2018. Dartmouth Crossing has applied for permits for this and private street construction. The building permit is anticipated to be applied for in 2 to 3 months with construction by late summer. Our first development agreement also provides for buildings on the opposite side of this building. Next slide, please, slide 21. And it frames the esplanade between them. Slide 22. The development agreement also allows for Council to allow us to return for additional buildings within this residential area, again, framed around an esplanade. Slide 23. Assuming that this first area of development is successful, Dartmouth Crossing would intend to come back to Community Council for the remaining third of our Pad 60 area for the residential development. Slide 24. With respect to public parkland and connections to this development, Council, through the agreement, required us to turn over additional parklands, Slide 25, to the municipality, and to connect the new residential area via the multipurpose trail, both by on Finley Drive and up into the development, Slide 26. With the next buildings would come further extensions, Slide 27. In terms of the visual character of the esplanade, these were the images shown to Council in 2018 of the green esplanade showing stormwater systems as well as green parkland. All of the parking is underground, and except for the visitor parking, which is on the surface. Slide 28. The design precedent for this residential development is coming out of ecological design principles in Germany. The bottom image shows a green esplanade with very dense residential development along it. It is located immediately adjacent to very major employment centers, which can be seen in the top corner of the bottom left image in your screen. The esplanade is focused around a multi-purpose trail and has major transit systems on both ends of it. Slide 29. I'm wrapping up here now. I wanted to say that we are, as Glenn indicated, nearing completion of our master plan. We are at approximately 75 to 80% complete. The majority of the retail and light industrial uses have been taken up, and hotel. The residential area is the last area. Glenn said in his initial presentations to council that it would be, and it is, but it is now underway. And I'm going to now show you a few slides you haven't seen, and these are the new renders of the residential buildings that are coming in for building permit in a few months' time. So slide 31 is the master plan of the area. Slide 32 is the new renders of the building. Slide 33 shows the new center entrance area. It's 25,000 square feet of shared amenity space between the two towers. And slide 34 illustrates the view from the roof deck, looking back out over the wetland in the opposite direction, a very large passive space. Slide 35, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of council for the presentation of Dartmouth Crossing? Any further comments or questions by anyone? Councillor Mancini.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Margot and Glenn. No comments about the presentation. Good to see vision and the master plan and where we are with it. And for, Dartmouth Crossing plays a significant positive role for our municipality, so we appreciate having them here in District 6. They've done a lot of good work from an environmental point of view, and even earlier on, there were some issues with that corrected, and that they're the example when it comes to the environment. So no questions about the presentation, just appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Any other comment or questions by any other councillors? Hearing none, I'd like to thank Dartmouth Crossing for the extensive presentation, and thanks for the update. Next item of business is information items by phone are done. Staff reports and discussion. We have item 13.1.1, case number 22847, development agreement for PID 003744652 and 414-66160 Main Road at Silvers Lane in Eastern Passage. Staff are prepared for presentation.
There's no presentation for this first reading, Mr. Chair, but I'm happy to answer any questions from councillors or yourself.
Okay, then I'll ask Councillor Kent then to move the motion then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council give notice of motion to consider the proposed development agreement as set out in attachment A of the January 13, 2021 report to construct two four-story multiple unit dwellings on lands in Eastern Passage and schedule a public hearing. So moved.
Second, Councillor Austin.
Councillor Austin, second. Thank you. Are there?
I do have a question, Mr. Chair.
No questions? I'll ask the motion.
No, I have a question.
Okay, you have a question. Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. I don't know how far I can get into this, but I do have a question around in the report, page 3, under the primary differences between the existing development agreement and the current proposal. I'm just looking at the change. This changes the development agreement area to remove a PID 004000044, which is now under separate ownership agreement. For the benefit of council, this owner who owns this now was the original person owner who put the first DA application in for a whole number of reasons, all good and bad, around process. He got to the point where he just couldn't manage moving forward with it, and so he owns now that small one PID. What I want to know is this is separate. This agreement takes that and removes it from this agreement, but it will remain governed by the existing development agreement. To me, that doesn't make sense. It's saying it changes the development agreement area to remove this PID, which is under separate ownership, and will remain governed by the existing development agreement. I don't understand why that would be the case. If it is owned by someone else, we're discharging the old agreement. Why would that parcel, who is owned by somebody completely separate, who has the same C2 zoning and can currently do what they want to do on C2, why would it remain in that existing development agreement have to be go back to that development agreement to do anything, and subsequently the developers who have this DA that is going to public hearing, they would also have to consider what is happening on that PID, even though they don't own it. So it just makes sense.
So I might ask Carl Purvis to step in here, but I believe there is a reason that legal services wanted the development agreement to remain on their parcel. So they could also apply to council to discharge the development agreement from that parcel. What we're asking for with this application is a partial discharge, affecting only the properties that are subject to this application. So do you know what I remember an email coming through from Maggie Home and from Legal Services answering that exact question, but I can't off the top of my head remember what the answer was.
Good evening, councillors. Carl Purvis, Planning Applications Program Manager. So originally there was one development agreement applied to a single site that was since subdivided into multiple sites. That means that any individual given property, so there was one portion, now there are multiple, any one given portion of the property can discharge off the development. In one of the cases, the development agreement, it afforded them certain rights and uses. It also limited their access. So there's one particular property on the site that no longer had the access afforded to them that they originally did. So basically what happened is that without the access that they had onto the main road, they didn't have access to the full suite of uses that they would otherwise get. Our traffic engineers, the engineers, they looked at this and they said, well, if you don't have that access on the main road, we're concerned about the traffic, especially where it's on the apex of the curve. There's a bit of a blind turn there. They had some concerns about that. So one application is to limit the number of uses. This application is to do something different, which is to discharge that old agreement, put something new on.
Yeah, my understanding though is that the owner of the PID that's to be removed and not released from the development agreement originally had no intention of including that piece, that PID in that development agreement. Staff almost 10 years ago said that he should, and he had no choice, have only come around full circle now to get where he doesn't. In fact, it's zoned correctly now, or it was originally. I don't know if I've got the full language extent, and has been in conversation with staff around the need for that to be released. So why couldn't we just do it now? Why couldn't I just don't understand why that particular piece would have to be reapplied again. He would have to apply again, and I don't know if there's a cost involved in that or not, to be discharged. And we'd have to go through another long process for him. He's been almost 10 years trying to get to here. I really don't see, I'd like to know what that logic is. Now, I don't know if we can get an answer of that tonight, or if sure. If we can't, I'm open to having that still on the table, look for an answer. I don't know if I have to put a motion to that effect on the table tonight, but certainly before this development agreement goes to public hearing, I would like to have a better understanding, because if it needs to be adjusted, I want to know what the process is here for this not to be belabored and a lengthy deliberation over that. To me, it just doesn't make sense.
So the councillor, or Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor, the other application, the gentleman that you're speaking to, the one that's run by the other planner, Daryl Jodry, that gentleman is looking to have access to the C2 uses, the uses of the C2 zone. Now, that's a bit strange because the property's already zoned C2. So to your point, if you took off the development agreement, you can just have the uses. The problem is that there's two steps in developing a property. You've got the uses, so usually they're by the standard zoning bylaw, or sometimes a development agreement is applied over top, and those are the uses that you have the right to. So where the development agreement has been applied to that site, they basically say these are what the uses that you have. So if you took that development agreement away, you would have access to the uses. However, in the second step comes the permitting. And at the stage of permitting, that is when our traffic engineers would look at the specific site, the specific form, the specific building, and the access, and they would determine whether or not they would grant approval to and for that access. So basically, the traffic engineers are saying, no, the full suite, now that the access has been changed because of the first development agreement, the way that the parcels have been broken down, the way that the access has been put in, the driveways, the private orientation, they're not all public roads. The traffic engineers are saying the full suite of C2 uses is not appropriate from the traffic engineering perspective. So what this development agreement that is on that other application is doing is giving the applicant, the landowner, access to some of the C2 uses, but not all of the C2 uses. And we've gone back and forth with the applicant, and he feels that, yes, these are going to be the ones that are going to meet my needs. So that's why it's a little bit more complicated than just taking the development agreement off and leaving the C2 zone. He's in this process right now so that we can get the right suite, so that everything, all of the uses that he's got in that development agreement are ones that he's going to be able, on that second step, to get his permit.
Yeah, we had meetings with him the other day on this with other staff around this, and I think it was being conveyed to me differently, maybe some of it the same. I still feel like there's a lot of confusion around it. So I'm unsure, how can I, and this is for you, Simon, or you, Mr. Chair, or I'm open to any other councillors who might have insight. This is still for me, this is still a very unsettled area for this to go forward, unless there is an absolute, there's an opportunity to get this clarified. I fear we've bogged this process down for this landowner for too long, for years, and this is a golden opportunity to deal with it once and for all. And I feel like mixed messages are coming back to me. So I don't know. Anyone want to comment? I don't quite know what to do with this.
When I asked staff, do you think there's a need for a supplementary report to get the clarification that the councillor is looking for before we proceed with this? Or should this be deferred or postponed, or let it still proceed for hearing or reading, and then have a supplementary report to clarify the point that she wants confirmed?
That I would be open to. I don't want to slow this down either, but I would be open to that second one, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, we have two separate applications from two separate individuals owning two separate pieces of property. So the one going forward tonight, again for first reading, and one that we expect, I think, Councillor Kent, we talked about this, expecting this to be coming in the subsequent month. We're just waiting for the landowner to give us the okay on his development agreement to say, yes, this is what I'm looking for, and we're just looking for that confirmation. So they're going to be in pretty close proximity, but they are separate people, separate applications, and we can address any questions, comments. You can send us back. You can ask for a supplementary report for that separate application, and proceeding with this one, which is, again, a separate issue with separate people asking for separate things.
So if he's got a development agreement and he's tied up with this development agreement, can that be corrected if that's where we land? Can that be corrected later on this development agreement? Would this one have to come back in order for this one to discharge him from it if in fact that's where you land? Am I making sense?
Could I ask a question? Would it be more advantageous to have both files to come together simultaneously to one public hearing?
No, I don't necessarily think that's the question that I would want to ask. I guess what I want to ask, let me be clear. We have two development agreements, two different parcels of land. One is tied up into this second one, and that second one is potentially going to go to public hearing if this approved tonight. When that's in public hearing, and let's say this other one comes forward and staff conclude that he should be discharged from this other one. I don't know. I think that's the goal from, I don't want to speak for the applicant, but that's kind of what I'm hearing. Can that be done without bringing this one forward again?
So number one, through you, Mr. Councillor, or Mr. Chair, to the councillor. I don't, my understanding, the best of my understanding is that if the development agreement were discharged from that other gentleman's property, the case that is not in front of us tonight, in front of you tonight, if that development agreement were discharged from that land, he would not have access to the full suite of uses that he would think he does. That in fact, that development agreement is in fact required to give him access to the uses that he's looking for, the CT uses on that land. That is my understanding. So if that is not the case, the staff report, the staff presentation, all of the information that you get at that time, that will explain all of that in detail, broken down with a presentation before council can make a decision on that. If at that point the decision was, you know what, for whatever reason to discharge that existing development agreement from the land and just have that C2 use, yes, that could be done at that time as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's what I needed clarity on. And if that one stayed in, what kinds of things would require that separate parcel, the 00404 that's being removed? What kinds of things would trigger having to come back to council because it's under a DA?
Well, if a development, are you saying, the question is, if the development agreement were to remain, what would you have to go back to council for in order to develop under that? Well, as long as, a development agreement, again, it acts in the place of a land use bylaw. So similar with the land use bylaw, if you're meeting all the rules, then you go off to our development services group, you get your permit, you're on your way. If you're not meeting all the rules or you need the rules to change, that's the scenario where you would come back to council as this gentleman is doing now.
Super. Thank you, Carol. This has been helpful. Thank you, colleagues, for bearing with me as I try to recall and get re-educated on the processes here. I don't want to make a misstep and leave someone disadvantaged unintentionally. So, okay, on that, I'm good. I'm going to support this, and I'll leave it with my colleagues if they want to offer anything else.
Are there any further questions from any of the councillors? Hearing none, I'll call for the question on the motion then. All those in favor, say aye.
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 No one opposed, motion carried. And I'll acknowledge that Councilor Mancini's left the meeting, so missed the vote, okay? The next item of business is item 13.1.2, secondary suites and backyard suites, housekeeping amendments. First, I want to put the motion on the floor, please, and we have an opportunity for clarification from anyone.
I'd be happy to read that one out, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Councillor Austin. Go ahead, sir.
I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council give first reading to consider approval of the proposed amendments to the land use bylaws for Dartmouth, downtown Dartmouth, Lawrencetown, and planning districts 8 and 9 as set on attachment A of the January 4th, 2020 report to complete housekeeping amendments for provisions regarding secondary and backyard suites and schedule a public hearing.
Second.
Seconder, please. Councillor Kent seconds. Are there any questions or comments on this?
Question.
Not at this stage.
Hearing none, is there anything the staff want to clarify for us on this matter, or we wait till the hearing? Wait till the hearing? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item of business, we have item 13.1.3, the Dahlia Oak Crichton Active Transportation Connection. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council recommend that Halifax Regional Council approve the permanent implementation of I don't know if that's 680 or 68 meters, whatever it is, of enhanced walking, rolling, and cycling facilities connecting
680 meters.
680, thank you. Connecting the Dartmouth Common to the Shubenacadie Canal Greenway via Dahlia Street and Sullivan's Pond Park as described in the discussion section of the January 27th, 2021 report.
Thank you. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Purdy, will second that? Okay, thank you.
I sure will.
Are there any questions or comments? Does it need a presentation on this, Sam? Is there for any benefit for the public who may be watching?
I mean, we're going to see it again at regional. Does staff have a presentation?
Good evening, Councillor Austin. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Councillor. We don't have presentation slides prepared for this evening. I could give a quick 2 to 3 minute verbal executive summary if you would like, or we could move on to questions. It's completely up to you.
Let's hear the summary and I'll probably answer everyone's questions.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you for having us tonight. With the Dahlia Oak Creighton Active Transportation Connections Project, we're proposing 680 meter connection between the Dartmouth Common and the Shubenacadie Canal Greenway, that Hawthorne Street, connecting northward up there. So our objectives are to build a AAA cycling connection to connect between the Dartmouth Common and the Shubenacadie Canal Greenway. We're using a complete streets lens to look at this corridor and incorporating any benefits we can see for people who might be walking or taking transit. Also in this project, there are some opportunities to integrate missing segments of sidewalk, for example, on Oak Street, Dahlia and Creighton, and realign some challenging intersections that have had sightline issues and make it easier for people to move around the neighborhood with an emphasis on vulnerable road users. So I will reiterate that this is part of the All Ages and Abilities Cycling Network as described in the Integrated Mobility Plan. So Dahlia is on that map as a candidate local street bikeway. And my colleagues and I have undertaken a functional planning process just to confirm that this is the desired route for people to get through the neighborhood and to look into different designs that could make this a safe, comfortable, and convenient connection. It's a fairly short but important segment in terms of the regional network, and it also could tie into our blue network, or I mean the regional blue route and the Great Trail as well. So great for walking and cycling and all those different more regional connections. We undertook 2 rounds of public engagement, so in August and in October of 2020, all virtual, but we engaged just over 650 participants through these 2 rounds. We also engaged various internal stakeholders, including traffic, parks and recreation, road operations and construction, and Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency to make sure that the proposed designs would be kind of accessible and maintainable by all of the different departments. And the proposed approach is outlined in the report. Our recommended design includes a series of pavement markings, traffic calming features to manage the speed along the corridor, Measures to improve crossings at intersections. We can close up the intersection with curb extensions, and we're proposing maybe a series of some RRFB flashing beacons to help get across those busier streets. There's also a multi-use pathway connection proposed through Sullivan's Pond Park that helps line up with the crossings and make it a more direct connection to the Shubenacadie Canal Greenway. All of these proposed active transportation improvements will be added alongside some new sidewalk segments on Oak Street and on Dahlia Street and on Creighton Avenue. And we hope to construct it. Our target, if approved, our target for construction would be in summer, fall of 2021, alongside some other major road recapitalization, which would be happening at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So look forward to the presentation when it gets to full council. Any further questions from any of the colleagues?
If I can just make a few comments, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
I'm very pleased to see this coming forward. It's a neighborhood I know well. I live only a street up on Tulip, and you know, in terms of concerns from the neighborhood, crossing over to the common, the crossing at Sullivan's Pond, these are areas that have come up many times in the neighborhood. There's also concerns about speed in the area, and this project tackles, this is not just a bike project, this is a streets project, and it really aims for not just at cyclists. This is also about making things safer for pedestrians in the area. The improvements to the Sullivan's Pond end, I mean that end of Dahlia and Oak Street, I mean, it's just a total mess, right? It was never built with human beings in mind at all, and this project is going to make such a huge difference in that. So I'm very pleased with all the components of this. The only questions I have, you know, and I get you got to draw some lines somewhere, but I understand why the stop sign idea on Pine Street and Dahlia was not pursued, but I mean, I think we're still going to have some potential unresolved issues with the speed of cars coming down the hill, as we do have a fair bit of shortcutting traffic in there. That you know, I'm not entirely convinced that we have that entirely sorted out. And then the other piece I have is just a question on the beach to Dahlia, on the beach to Creighton's piece of Dahlia, where the parking impacts are. The report isn't entirely clear. Would parking still be allowed on one side of Dahlia on that block, or would parking be removed entirely?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, we anticipate that parking would only be lost on one side of the street, between Beach and Creighton. That's something that we still need to confirm as we're working through kind of the detail in the final design process. I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you. I think that will be next to no impact. Like I said, I know this one well because it is my own front door. I can't ever recall seeing a car parked on you know, the side of Dahlia Street where there's no sidewalk in the apartment building. So I think the net impact of that will be next to nil. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from colleagues? Hearing none, then I'll call for the question then. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing no opposition, motion carried. Item 13.2, members of Community Council, no items to bring forward. No motions, no in-camera items. Are there no added items? Are there any notices of motions, colleagues? Hearing none, our next scheduled meeting is for March the 4th, 2021. I'll call for a motion for adjournment, please. Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn by Councilor Purdy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night, all. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Take care.
It's a pretty shirt, Trish. I keep admiring it.
Good night, all.